You've been searching for the best way to generate passive income in your life and heard that real estate is a great way to do it. But you're tired of all the so-called gurus who are all talk and no substance. Get ready to celebrate because Kevin Buck has spent 14 years successfully making it happen. This is the Real Estate Investing for Cash Flow podcast. Now, here's Kevin Buck.
Hey guys, Kevin Bupp here, and I want to welcome you to another episode of the Real Estate Investing for Cash Flow podcast. Our mission is to help you build and maintain massive amounts of cash flow through income-producing real estate investments. Now, our guest for this week's show is hotel and hospitality expert Brad Rahinsky. Now, Brad serves as President and Chief Executive Officer of Hotel Equities, an Atlanta-based full-scale hotel ownership, management, and development firm. He's responsible for developing the long-term vision for Hotel Equities and supports all aspects of the firm's growing business. Prior to joining Hotel Equities, Brad co-owned a successful portfolio of Hilton and Hyatt branded hotels in the Southeast. He got his early start in the hotel space as bellman, working to put himself through school. Throughout his early years, he made his way up the ranks through progressive executive level positions with Sheraton, Hyatt, Wyndham, and various independent resorts. Brad serves as a member of the Towne Place Suites by Marriott Franchise Advisory Committee and Hilton's Hampton Inn and Suites Owners Advisory Council. He earned a BS degree in Communication Arts with a minor in marketing from the University of West Florida. He and his beautiful wife, Tricia, have 5 children and reside in Fulton County, north of Atlanta, Georgia. And given the current state of affairs in our country related to the Covid-19 pandemic, the hotel and lodging industries have been some of the hardest hit in the commercial real estate sector. And so with that, I wanted to bring on a seasoned expert who has been through a litany of recessions as well as the H1N1 and SARS events to discuss how they are not only weathering the current storm, but more importantly, what necessary steps the industry as a whole are taking to prepare and adapt to the new norm that is coming upon us. And so with that, I'm excited to get onto the show with Brad. But before we do, I have a few quick housekeeping items to run through. Now, like I do on a regular basis, I haven't done it the last couple of shows, but I typically like to share my one personal and one professional best of the prior week. And so I'm going to go ahead and do that here now. My personal best, guys, simply put, I'm unbelievably grateful that my family is safe and healthy during these uncertain times that we find ourselves in. And, as with anything, there's typically a silver lining. And the silver lining during this COVID-19 pandemic is that I've had the opportunity to spend even more dedicated time than normal with my wife and my boys. And this has ultimately created some very magical moments over this last month or so. And so it just, again, there's always silver linings, even in the worst of times. And I'd have to say that during this pandemic, it's been the opportunity to create some very special moments with my family. As far as a professional best, I'm just incredibly proud of our team at Sunrise Capital. And that's not including just those in the corporate office, but also we have a large amount of staff out in the field, which includes our community managers, our sales team, customer support, what have you. Everyone on the team as a whole has risen to the occasion, and the results are showing, even through these uncertain times. And so I'm just incredibly proud of everyone within the Sunrise organization. Moving on here, guys, if you love what we're doing here at the Real Estate Investing for Cash Flow podcast, please take a moment, if you haven't done so already, go over to iTunes, leave a rating and review, and also subscribe so you can get notified when new episodes come out. We attract awesome guests like Brad only due to the feedback that you give us, and that comes in the form of a review. Okay, so please, it helps us grow the business, attracts awesome guests each and every week, and so please take the time to go do that for me. I'd greatly appreciate it. And lastly, before we get rolling here to the call with Brad, just want to remind you of the free 30-minute call that I do each and every Friday, where you can essentially jump on the phone with me for 30 minutes and discuss anything and everything your heart desires regarding real estate investing. Whether you're brand new or you're a seasoned investor, I've owned just about every type of real estate, with the exception of hotels. I have not owned a hotel in the past, but I've owned lots of other types of commercial real estate as well as residential real estate throughout my 20 some odd years as an investor. And so we can get on that call and talk about anything your heart desires about real estate. I'm here to help you. And now, guys, without further ado, let's get on to the part of the show that you've been waiting for, which is our interview with Brad Rahinsky. So here we go. Alrighty, guys, it is my honor to introduce my guest for today's show, hospitality industry expert and president and CEO of Hotel Equities, Brad Rahinsky. Brad, how you doing today?
Kevin, good afternoon. I'm doing well. I appreciate you asking. Hope you are as well.
Yeah, I'm doing fantastic. Appreciate you coming on the show, especially with short notice and due to the times we find ourselves in. I know that everyone's just incredibly busy, especially if you're in the real estate industry, let alone in the hospitality industry, which you guys are feeling a great deal of pain. And so very much looking forward to just really getting some feedback from you as to how you guys are managing things, what the future looks like. Assuming you have a crystal ball that works, hopefully you do, and just really having a serious discussion about the current matters that we're dealing with. And so, I did a little bit of digging, and your bio is quite impressive. You've led Hotel Equities to be one of the largest and most successful hotel management companies in the world. And I'm sure this stat, hopefully this is updated. I pulled it off the website there. And just in the last 8 years alone, you've added 50 plus hotels to the portfolio spread amongst 22 different states. And so that's quite impressive to say the least. And, but fast forwarding to where we're at today, the hospitality industry, it looks very different today than what it did just in February, right? A very short time ago. And, I'm looking forward to digging in and getting a better understanding of not only just Hotel Equities and what it is you guys do, but ultimately being that you're very much a leader in your space, in a space that is being probably severely impacted more than a lot of the other commercial real estate sectors. Exactly what the plan of attack is, how you guys are managing, and again, what that bright future looks like for you. And so with that being said, Brad, for those folks that might not be familiar with you and your background, I'd love for you to take the mic for a few minutes and just tell us a little bit more about yourself and ultimately how you found yourself in the hospitality industry.
Sure. Well, once again, thanks for having me, and I appreciate the kind words there. I think the only one who thinks that I may have had anything to do with all those accomplishments that you just ran through may be my wife. Other than that, everybody has seen right through me and knows it's all about the leaders around me that have done all the hard work and smart work. I got started in the business 32 years ago. Back in 1987, I was a bellman. And initially, it was a summer job. I was looking for some cash in my pocket. Best job I ever had. And I've never left the business. So fast forward 32 years, and it's been an absolute blessing for my family and I, and has served us well. I've been in all aspects of the business. I started off, as I mentioned, as a bellman. Then I kind of jumped into the sales side of the business at the property level for a number of years. And then I jumped over to operations because I wanted to kind of have a comprehensive background in terms of the whole business and how it's run and operates. And then I went to above property level, and I worked for a number of the brands, including Starwood and Wyndham and Hyatt, and worked with Marriott. And then I started to work with groups that developed and owned and operated hotels, and lived all over the country doing that. And ultimately, about 20 years ago, landed here in Atlanta, which is where Hotel Equities is headquartered. Mm-hmm. As you mentioned, we're currently in 25 states. We have 140 hotels. We own, operate, and develop those hotels. We have about 3,000 associates all around the country and up in Canada that are running those hotels. And we have a few different corporate offices. We're headquartered in Atlanta, but we also have offices in Texas, in Arizona, in Tennessee, and in Canada, up in Edmonton. So tremendous growth, mostly led because of a tremendous team that we've surrounded ourselves with here, and best in class in terms of performance and metrics, but also equally important, best in class in terms of culture and caring for one another and servant leadership, which is really the foundation for who we are as an organization.
Yeah, fantastic. So just to provide some context, you've been there 20 years at Hotel Equities. When was the actual company founded, and what did the company look like back then prior to you coming on board?
Sure. So actually, I've been with Hotel Equities for about 8 years, a little over.
Okay,
8
got it.
The company's been around for 30 years. We started in 1989 by Fred Cerrone, who is still our chairman and founder, and we call him Coach. And if you know anything about the hotel business, you know Coach, because there's nobody better. He's just the epitome of what a leader is, what a stand-up guy is and does. And about 30 years ago, he was approached by Mr. Marriott, as Mr. Marriott was starting to kick around the idea of franchising out hotels. And he wanted to do that with a select few individuals that he trusted and knew that had high integrity standards and also had good operational background. Coach was one of those very few. And fast forward 30 years, today we, as I mentioned, have 140 hotels all around the country and up in Canada. And Coach is still very involved, particularly on the development side and on the people side of our business. That's really what he's best in class at and what he'll never stop doing.
Yeah, fantastic. So you've worked your way up through the ranks, but today, as it sits with your role as president and CEO, what exactly does that entail on a day-to-day basis? Maybe not day-to-day today because we're in some weird times, but generally speaking, what does that role consist of?
Yeah, so prior to, let's call it March 1st, what that really consisted of making sure that I was a resource to my leaders and all the disciplines that we measure to ensure that they had the tools and resources necessary to be wildly successful. We measure our performance against a few key metrics that are not just brand to brand or management company to management company, but also our own internal measurements that we deem mission critical to ensure that every day when we get up, we're asking ourselves, are we better than we were yesterday? And what do we need to do today to be better tomorrow? Got it. I'm really a supplier of resource and experience to my team and making sure that they have what they need to go out there and get it done.
Okay, fantastic. So I appreciate that background there. And, I don't know really how to start this portion of the conversation other than, I kind of alluded to it, during the introduction. Again, we're in very different times today as we record this. On April 21st, and a lot has changed since February. I mean, just using that as like some type of marker, right, to start from. The world was a very different place in February, and it's quickly changed over a period of about a month and a half. Really, is where the significant impact has come, and being that the hospitality industry was one of the first ones impacted, and ultimately is probably feeling maybe equal amounts of pain to retail. Probably the most of anyone as far as commercial real estate sectors are concerned, or just industries in general are concerned. And so I guess from your perspective, just give us through your lenses what it has really looked like in the trenches from, again, February as the marker to where we are today. Let's use that as a starting point, and then we can kind of roll from there if we could.
Sure. Well, Kevin, as you heard me mention, I've been in the business now for a little over 30 years. So I've been through a number.
Seen a lot. Yeah.
Seen a lot. I have. And I've been through a number of cycles. I've been through a number of recessions, including the Great Recession of 2009. Mm-hmm. Obviously, I've been through 9/11 and how that impacted our industry in a significant and meaningful way. I've been through H1N1, SARS, different viruses and pandemics that obviously had dramatic impact and significant impact. An immediate impact to our business. But if you were to take all of those major black swan events that have happened over the past 20, 25, 30 years at the macro level, turn it into a micro conversation for hospitality specific, and roll all those up together, they don't equate to the erosion, the acceleration of erosion that we've seen here in our space in the past 45 days. It is truly unprecedented in all metrics and in all areas that the hospitality industry measures. The acceleration of the erosion on all of those KPIs has never been seen before.
Hey guys, Kevin Bupp here, and I'm sorry for interrupting the show, but I have something super important that I wanted to share with you. Now, over the last few episodes, you've probably caught wind of me dropping hints on a little known about asset class that my team and I are very excited about. And that asset class is parking. More specifically, parking lots and parking garages in highly desirable markets. And just like we were ahead of the curve with mobile home parks, we feel that parking is one of the last asset classes where the mass consolidation has yet to occur. Anyway, we just wrapped up writing an ebook which goes into detail of the many reasons we are so bullish on parking investments and why you should consider this as a potential investment vehicle when seeking cash flowing real estate investments. Now, to grab your free copy of Parking Lot Profits, the top 10 reasons parking investments generate cash flow and legacy wealth, you can text the word parking lot to 31996. Again, text the word parking lot to 31996. All one word, no spaces, parking lot, all one word, to 31996. And with that, let's get back to the show.
To put it into perspective, last year, as an example, for the month of April, our portfolio ran around 72, almost 73% occupancy. And that's hotels all over the country. That's hotels that are select service hotels, full service hotels, luxury hotels on the beach. So pretty good cross section, pretty good wide example of the overall segment, if you will. So almost 73% occupancy, April 2019. To date, April 2020, we're running around 13% occupancy.
Wow.
And the rate that we're getting that 13% occupancy is significantly less than the rate that we had at that 73% occupancy in 2019. So you can't account for and you can't overstate that type of erosion. And as much as we've done to offset that from a cost or expense standpoint, and to button down the hatches, you just cannot do enough. You're not taking the knife to the bone. You're taking it into the bone and through the muscle at that point.
And at this point in time, there's been no legislation put forth that would offer any type of life support to just commercial real estate in general, specifically the hospitality. Has there, or am I incorrect with that statement?
Yeah, so we're very fortunate. The administration has worked pretty hard and fast to put together the CARES Act. So we've been able to participate at the property level for what's called the Triple P component of the CARES Act, which is a nice lifeline, a temporary lifeline that allows us to tap into a 2.5x of salaried positions at the property level. And look, that was incredibly welcome. We obviously participated. We enrolled there. We applied.
We did too.
And we're accepted into that at the property levels. And so not discounting that. And we're speaking today, I believe the Senate has approved another tranche to go through there, which will take that program ultimately up to about $600 billion in funds that will either be distributed as a loan or, if you're using it the right ways, ultimately forgivable as a grant. So it's a tremendous program, one that we're thankful for, and one that our AHLA, which is the American Hotel Lodging Association, led by Chip Rogers, has worked tirelessly to make sure that hospitality was represented in that legislation. Mm-hmm. All that being said, Kevin, the reality of it is it is a pimple on a whale's behind. Make sure that we're getting the necessary funds out to our hotel owners and developer partners to ensure that they're able to withstand this triage that's taking place right now and come out of this thing hopefully in a position to where they can come out swinging and start to, once we stabilize, start to rebound a bit and understand cash flows again.
Yeah. No, it's again just very, very interesting times we find ourselves in. And I think the less clear part of the picture that I don't think it just is applicable to the lodging or hospitality industry, but just to basically all fronts. Retail, office. I mean, there's lots of behavioral changes that are going to come about after we get to whatever that new normal looks like. Again, it's all just conjecture at this point in time. We're trying to figure out literally just day by day how to get by, let alone what the next couple of quarters look like, right? We can all be optimistic and we should be, right? I mean, optimism will help get us through these challenging times. But again, those behavioral shifts are the things that I'm sure you guys have had a lot of discussions about, once we, do open up certain states or certain regions, what have you, what do those behavioral changes to folks that would have been a client or, been one of your customers at one of your hotels, like what do those changes do to them? Are they still staying at hotels? Are they now going to, maybe more shorter term, like Airbnb type arrangements where they're not in a, densely, arranged situation such as a hotel? And I'd love to hear about like what that sounds like behind the scenes, what those discussions entail with you and your team and other folks within the industry of what the progression hopefully is going to look like getting back to that new norm.
Yeah, it's a great question. I'm fortunate enough. I sit on a few boards. I sit on a board for Marriott. I sit on a board for Hilton. I sit on a board for a local hospitality brokerage firm that is very active in selling and acquiring hotels around the country and around the world for that matter. ultimately, what everyone is saying, Kevin, is that in order for consumer confidence to truly come back and to start to book back into hotels in any meaningful or material way, what's ultimately going to happen is some sort of either vaccination or some sort of prophylactic that will enable the consumer to avoid the COVID sickness, the COVID virus, in whatever setting they're going to be putting themselves into. One of the great things about hotels, obviously, is it creates engagement. It creates an environment, whether it be in the lobby or in a banquet room or in a restaurant, but it creates guest engagement. And that's obviously a keystone of who we are as a hospitality industry. The challenge that creates in this current environment is that engagement is what's being frowned upon in many ways, as we've been behavior modification towards social distancing and separation. And so there's got to be some consumer confidence in dipping your toe back in the water that says, we understand there's risk, but we also understand that at some point here as a nation, as a consumer, as a guest, we're going to have to start to go back in and create whatever that new norm looks like. I live in the state of Georgia, and here the governor yesterday announced that we were going to start opening back up as of this Friday. So you and I are speaking today on Tuesday, and roughly 72 hours from now, we're going to start opening up some basic services back again. And I think that's going to be a great bellwether for the country to see. And look, there is no playbook for what we're doing right now. There's going to be some mistakes made, and there's going to be some bad numbers that get pushed out in terms of infections and fatalities still, but it will be a bellwether for other states to see and hopefully utilize Georgia as a template, if you will, to better understand how they should initiate the reopening of their economy, because we can't just simply shut down everything in perpetuity. We have a $22 trillion GDP that we've effectively closed down as a nation here. And at some point, somebody's got to take some calculated and intelligent risk to say we got to slowly start getting things back to normal.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with all that. And, again, time will tell, right? And I'm not sure if there's a right or wrong decision. There's decisions that have to be made. And ultimately, only time will tell whether or not, they were, in our favor or against. Again, but someone's got to make that first move. And so we'll have to use that as the barometer, Georgia, and see how that plays out over the next week or two. And I think Florida's going to be right behind. In fact, I think the talks are already looking towards the beginning of May sometime, at least the last I heard. So, we'll see. But I wanted to talk about some of the other factors. Again, it's probably some of the other conversations you guys have had behind the scenes. Again, assuming that this social distancing becomes maybe not the new norm, but it's still conscious, right? It's still fresh in everyone's minds. And so as it relates to some of the ancillary income streams that you guys experience in the lodging and hospitality sector, such as event space, for conferences and workshops and things of that nature, it's probably safe to say that for a period of time, it's probably going to take longer for confidence to come back into those large group gatherings than it might for someone just to get comfortable with staying at a hotel, right? And so have there been any discussions behind the repurposing of that large type of event space, even if it's just in a temporary manner, to help boost some of that ancillary revenue that used to be a significant line item in the past?
Absolutely. So the brands, partners such as myself, other groups, peer groups similar to Hotel Equities, are all into those and involved with those conversations right now to identify. Look, we all are going to be more self-aware of our surroundings. The other day, just yesterday, I'm at a supermarket, and the individual behind me was certainly closer than 6 feet away. And while I didn't turn around and say anything, I was close, thinking, he felt like he was a little close to me. So I felt that, whereas on March 1st, I wouldn't have felt that. I wouldn't have been aware of somebody being maybe 3 feet away from me, 4 feet away from me. So I think if you take that same thinking and apply it to your hotel space and then walk literally every foot of your asset to determine where are the areas that you may not have thought about social distancing or self-awareness levels at a certain degree before. And now how do I take that thinking and apply it to every square foot of my asset to ensure that I'm monetizing areas that historically would have been monetized in a way that I would not have to have been so conscientious about. But today I need to be, and I need to apply that accordingly. So we'll walk the banquet space, we'll walk the public space, we'll walk the lobby space, we'll walk our gyms and our pool areas to make sure that we're looking at the square foot and we're looking at the footprint of those areas within our hotels to ensure that as a consumer, as a guest, that they're going to feel safe, that they're in a secure area that's clean and sanitized and doesn't affect their or their family's health by the time they check out of our hotels.
Interesting. Have there been any revelations as far as like large event space? What are some of the? Would it essentially still be large event space, but maybe there's kind of segregation put into place, or would there be? Have you guys had any discussions of complete repurposing into something different than that of a large event space?
Yeah, so it's more the former of where you were going there. So as an example, a 10,000 foot ballroom that may have held a function for 200, 250 people, whatever that function may be, a wedding or some sort of business function, that's now going to be used for 50 to 75 people. And we're going to distance things accordingly so that there's this natural flow with the appropriate amount of spacing between the different areas where people will congregate within that space. Similarly, what we'll do is we'll take what would have been a 5 or 10 or 15,000 foot ballroom or event space, and we'll now be able to partition that into 2, 3, 4, 5 different rooms. So we'll have smaller groups taking up that space where maybe on a typical Friday or Saturday night, it would have been one group, one large function taking that up.
Understood. So I want to back up. And, I asked about any legislation that had been put forth, and I wasn't referencing the CARES Act, which, the payroll protection program more specifically is what you had made note of, that you guys have obviously, any business, right, should have at least taken advantage of that if they've got folks on payroll looking to support them. But more specifically, really talking about legislation revolve around like mortgage relief, right? And I think that's the bigger risk when you look at it. It's not just your industry, but, retail industry. You talk about shopping centers, you talk about office buildings. There's maybe not office buildings today, unless you really, well, that's not true. I should back up, because you've got situations, and this is more pertains to retail, such as like Cheesecake Factory, right? They make the announcement 3 weeks ago that they ultimately weren't going to pay rent at their, I forget how many locations they have, thousands of locations across the country. I think, 1,200 or more. You've got other folks that are following. So I think Mattress Giant, or one of the big mattress chain stores, made the same type of announcement that they're not going to basically be paying rent at their many locations. And so there's a trickle down effect that ultimately will occur, and that owner of that real estate are the ones that ultimately will additionally suffer, right? Like there's not an end in sight. And so I didn't know if there's any type of specific support put forth outside of the CARES Act that might offer, or that's even slated to offer some type of mortgage relief or debt relief for those folks that are in the hospitality industry or just commercial real estate in general. I wasn't aware of it. So I think that's where I was going with that question. So, and I don't think that anything's been put forth. And correct me if I'm wrong there, as of today. It's been talked about, but there's been no solution proposed.
There hasn't. So you're correct. So while there is certainly some talks around that to date, nothing definitive has been announced. And it's been interesting. We've been very fortunate. We work very closely with our lenders at all times, and having that relationship with your lender and the ability to pick up the phone with him or her and talk about what your projections look like over the next 90 days, starting on March 15th. They've been wonderful. They've been completely understanding of our position as an industry, and specifically for Hotel Equities. Without exception, all of our lenders have stepped up and have helped us in terms of deferment or forbearance, and over the next 60, 90, 120 days to allow us to offset what would have been an obligation and to push that down a bit so that we can take our existing reserves and cash position and apply it accordingly for the most immediate necessary needs.
Yeah. And I'm assuming you probably have a litany of different debt sources or structures in place over the course of your business. And, I know that, the CMBS market has pretty much dried up. Obviously, those types of loans are securitized, sold on Wall Street. And then, there's a third-party servicer that manages those. We've got a number of those on assets that we own. And I know that CMBS has been pretty prevalent in the hospitality space for a number of years now, correct? After they kind of made their resurgence after, getting their act back together after 2011 and completely being gone for a couple of years. Is that a fairly predominant source of capital for hotel operators? Is CMBS debt?
It is, Kevin, and so there is significant exposure there in the hospitality space for CMBS. And over the next 3 to 6 months, it's going to be an interesting time for those folks that are bolted onto the CMBS structure. Yeah. As you know, they're far more rigid, and in terms of what their abilities are to defer or forbearance. So there's going to be an interesting period over the next 3 to 6 months within our space with CMBS.
So where I'm going with that is, and this doesn't necessarily apply to small operators per se, but the unfortunate result that's going to come out of this, and again, this is not just applicable to hospitality. This is going to run the gamut of all industries, some affected more than others. But is the attrition that gets spun out of this from the the operators that didn't have sufficient liquidity to survive, and the PPP was just the pimple in the whale's butt, right? I mean, kind of that idea. What do you guys? What are the projections in the space, just based on where we're at today, assuming that we get to some type of new norm over the next couple of months? But of those operators that they were already maybe on the brink of, if 1 month was a bad month, they'd be faltering a little bit. Now they find themselves in a situation where it's historically catastrophic event that's occurring. I mean, do you foresee there to be a lot of defaults in your industry as a result of it?
Yeah, short answer is yes, we do. Unfortunately, we think there is going to, particularly in the CMBS space, we think anywhere. And as I mentioned, I talk to a peer group every morning, and we run through those types of questions. And I'm hearing anywhere between 20 to 50% key hand back there on the CMBS side. So if and when that occurs, that's going to be an extremely significant event. The groups that are disciplined in good times, that have put away their capital and have maintained their reserves and continued to feed the reserves, have the right brands in place, are located within the right submarkets, right flags within those brands, should come out of this okay, Kevin. Ultimately, certainly, okay is a relative term, but they should be able to survive what's taking place right now. The groups that were marginal, were over leveraged, didn't have the right flag or the right location within a particular submarket, and have those very structured CMBS loans that there's not any wiggle room to negotiate around with, they're going to be in trouble. And while that is a lot of pain for a lot of people, a lot of good people, it also creates opportunity for folks who have dry powder and who are ready to go and invest in an asset that is going to trade at pennies on the dollar.
Mm-hmm. So, moving on to that part of the conversation again, and I don't want to seem insensitive about it, because it's a tough time for all, even folks that are tuning in here. I mean, more than likely, everyone's experiencing their own version of tough times, right? Some worse than others, and so related to the opportunities that might come out, for those that have dry powder on the sidelines. Is your team doing anything behind the scenes proactively to restructure the organization, restructure departments, what have you, but to basically prep yourselves for that point in time when it might come, whether it be 6 months, a year, 18 months, 24, what have you? And if so, what's that look like? Yeah,
sure. Great question. And to your point, without seeming insensitive, because a lot of the folks that I was just talking about in terms of feeling some pain now and are going to ultimately have to give keys back to the lender. Mm-hmm. Those are folks that I know and have known for years, and I respect and I admire them for who they are, for their entrepreneurial spirit, and for what they do and how they employ people. And so tough time for our industry, as tough sledding as I've ever seen. But yeah, our company, so Hotel Equities merged with a group back in December of 19, and we've been working with them for almost 4 years. That company is called Virtua Partners, and Virtua is headquartered out of Scottsdale, Arizona. Similar to us, we consider ourselves to be a best-in-class operator and developer of hotels. They are a class-leading, best-in-class in terms of capital raise and as a PE group. So when we merged a few months back, what that ultimately did for Hotel Equities is it created a capital arm that allows us to go out in the best of times, in normal times, to go out and identify assets to acquire that were either undermanaged, misflagged, or had upside potential, and or develop. Well, what this crisis is going to create is a lot of acquisition opportunity on assets that we would have looked at in the past, but we'll now be looking at it on a 60 or 70 or 50 cents on the dollar basis based off of what's deteriorated over the past 45, 60, 90 days. The challenging part with that right now is we're looking at a number of opportunities is how do you put a valuation against these assets? Yeah. And you know,
that's a good question. I mean, do you have an answer for that question? Because that's a good one.
I've talked to some really smart folks who are expert in that space in normal times, and they're all just, you mentioned the crystal ball earlier. They're all saying their crystal ball's in the shop today and finger in the air. I've heard everything from take a look at 2019 numbers and take off 200 basis points and increase the cap by a full 100 basis points. And I've heard look at 2010 and offer those numbers. No one knows. There's not a good answer to that. Our approach to that, though, Kevin, has been that, as I said a moment ago, that right market within the right submarket within the market, the right flag, high barriers to entry markets with multiple demand generators. And then we apply our metrics and our underwriting, which is a very conservative approach to the opportunity. And from there, if there is an opportunity to have the discussion on a trade or the acquisition, we'll apply all of our best thinking against that and get to what we believe to be a win-win for whether it be the lender and Hotel Equities or an existing owner at Hotel Equities to try to make it a equitable deal. But there's no question that there's going to be opportunities for groups such as mine who are liquid, who have been disciplined and have reserves ready to go to go out and develop and grow.
Yeah. Have there been any discussions around, the potential resurgence of this, let's say, same time next year, or it could even be in the fall, to where you guys are going to alter, what your normal, I guess, reserve budget might be per flag and boost that up to basically help offset a potential resurgence of this and a dip in occupancy? Or has that been part of the discussion at all?
Yeah, great question. So some disciplined groups have already been doing that, frankly. The past, let's call it since 2012, 2013, so the past 6.5, 7 years have been really frothy times in our space. And if you're a good operator, owner, developer, you've been doing that. You've been doubling up your reserves when you had the ability to do that, and you've been socking it away for a time like this or something similar to this where you knew, look, we're cyclical. While we certainly didn't anticipate this, we certainly anticipated it, the next downturn to come within the cycle. So there is the ability to do that. Part of the challenge with some of the groups that we were just talking about, though, is even in those frothy times when everybody was doing well, in some cases, in spite of themselves, they weren't doing the right things in terms of putting that money away and investing back into and delevering or leveraging down their debt. So that's part of the reason they were in the position they are today.
Yeah, no, all good points there. And, there's another part of this discussion that I'd love to have. I just don't think there's time for it. And it's really related to the investment side of it. But I think it's, as we'd mentioned before the caller, I think it's definitely like a part 2 series. And we'd love to, catch back up with you at a different time to discuss, those folks that are listening in that are investors that have an interest that might not be in your sector, that have an interest in actually actively being involved, whether as a developer, investor, what have you, passive, active, again, many different factors there, but I think it's a different discussion. So what I'd love to do at this point in time, I guess first, before we roll into the lightning round, is, Brett, is there anything else that's relative to Hotel Equities, what you guys are doing to manage this crisis as it relates to the COVID-19 pandemic? Is there any other bits or pieces of relevant info that we might have just breezed over that you'd like to share?
Yeah, Kevin, I think we've touched on a lot of the key points. The only thing that I would add is experience matters. And if you look at our senior leadership, we have nearly 300 plus years of experience in hospitality specifically, and folks that have been through these types of events who really understand what to do when certain triggers are pulled. So ultimately, hotels are real estate. And from an investment standpoint, they can be viewed a number of different ways, but ultimately, at the end of the day, they're real estate. And you heard me mention getting the right flag within the right market and multiple demand generators and barriers to entry, all of those things that you do to mitigate your risk as an investment, as an asset class. And then you apply good operators, experienced operators. Once again, you should be able to weather this storm and then come out of it well positioned to be swinging and go ahead and start growing again quickly based off of some of the challenges that others will be facing.
Mm-hmm. Yep. No, well put there. And so, Brad, what I'd love to do here at this point in time is roll into what we call the lightning round. So we got to learn a little bit about you in the beginning. You shared your background, how you got into the industry. But these are 6 questions, 6 short questions, looking for 6 short, concise answers, again, to get to know you a little bit more of an intimate level. And so the first one is your biggest fear. What is it?
Wow. I got 5 kids, and I just want to make sure that I'm there for them, and that by the time that I call it a day, that they know that their father was always there, and that they were my number one priority.
Yeah, good one. How about your one biggest regret?
Not marrying my current wife, who's my second wife, as my first wife. She's she's changed my world. She is the best thing that's ever happened to me, and should have met her a little sooner, but that's okay.
That's a good one. That's first. I like that. Yeah, good stuff. How about most influential book?
Well, I'm going to say the Bible, and there's not a close second. That is my compass. I fail every day, but I try to use it to make sure that's driving my decisions and my leadership. And so that's the book that I'd have to put there.
Okay, fantastic. And outside the daily work grind, what do you do to decompress? And that might be different today, based on all these stay-at-home restrictions. But just generally speaking, what is it that you do to decompress?
Yeah, so it's the same, but it's different in sort of what I do. So I like to hit the gym, and what I do these days certainly isn't what I used to do. I do a sissy workout these days, but it's still it's more important for me up here than it is for the physical aspect of what it does for me. It clears the cobwebs and it's where I do my best thinking, and so it's my yoga, if you will, being able to throw around some weights and get a good sweat going for about an hour.
Good deal. How about the one thing that you can't live without?
Well, look, I don't want to sound too corny or cheesy, but I've just got the best family on the planet between my wife and my kids. I mean, that's what does it for me. So if I'm having a tough moment or a tough day, and I just got to think about one of them and put a smile on my face and let me know that everything's going to be okay. Yeah. Close second is a good bowl of Haagen-Dazs ice cream at the end of the night. Some chocolate strawberry mix with a little Hershey's syrup on top of it. That's a good way to finish the night.
Oh man, yeah, you and me both on both of those. Unfortunately, the ice cream is pretty lethal for me. If it gets bought, then it gets gone in like one setting, which is horrible feeling. Last one here is what would the backup plan be? Your plan B if one morning you woke up and just decided that you've run your time in the hospitality industry, you kind of want to change up the scenery and the pace a little bit. Where would you devote your time, energy, and focus?
Yeah. So look, I love architecture and would have gotten into that, but I just wasn't bright enough. So I steered away from that. So the backup plan would be, I'm going to go wait tables. I love people.
What?
Yes, sir. I love people. I love that pace. I did it to put myself through college for a little bit. And while I was a bellman in the daytime, I'd wait tables at night. And that people piece is what does it for me.
Yeah, I am still a firm believer that I feel like everyone should, work in the hospitality industry as either as a waiter, server, host or hostess, bartender, what have you, at some point in their life to actually gain respect for that industry, because it's
Absolutely.
Yeah, no, I attended bar going through college, so I feel you, and wouldn't change it for the world. It was a lot of fun and great, just dealing with a ton of different people on a regular basis. So very enjoyable.
Yes, sir.
Brad, this has been a lot of fun. Really appreciate you coming on here, and sharing kind of again behind the scenes, in the trenches perspective on what Hotel Equities is doing, but more importantly, the industry as a whole. You've been involved in many different facets throughout the years with many different firms throughout the country, and you've got a real good handle in your arms around what's happening, what people are saying, what the plan of attack is moving forward. And so again, appreciate you sharing that with all of us, and really just wishing you and your team and your family all the best, right, as we again go through these uncharted waters. And you'd made a reference point in the beginning that you've been through the H1N1, you've been through the SARS, you've been through 9/11, you've been through 2008, like all these crazy ups and downs. And the funny thing, I don't remember the SARS or H1N1. I remember it, but there was never like a blip in my life based on those two life events. And but you being in the hospitality industry, like you've actually seen some type of impact from all those times that you've referenced. And appreciate you sharing that with us, but also giving us really a comparison and clear perspective of like how that looks, how today looks in comparison to all those different times you've been through. And I know it's challenging, it's tough. And again, wishing you the best through it all. And hopefully we'll have a conversation in 6 months and we can talk about, not that we've forgotten about, our memories aren't that short. We do have, as a species, we have a short memory, but I'm sure that it's still going to be very fresh in everyone's mind. But we'll talk about all the great things that have come about and changes that have been made in progress, what have you. So very much looking forward to that point in time, my friend.
Well, from your lips to God's ears, I look forward to that as well. I appreciate you having me on, and I hope you and your family stay well and safe. We're going to come out of this as a country, as a nation. We're going to come out of it swinging and get stronger because of it. So thanks for having me. Please stay safe and well.
Congratulations! Now you've got more of the best tricks of the trade in building massive amounts of passive income from real estate. For more amazing resources, visit realestateinvestingforcashflow.com, and we'll see you next Monday morning.